love their country
Yes.
and be patriots.
Actually, my partner happens to be a communist. She was not born in the United States, and she practices the same kind of communism that you're talking about right now, where it's not doctrinaire ideological communism. It's a concern for the poor, for the downtrodden, for those whose civil and human rights are not respected. She happens to not be religious. You're an Orthodox Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian. You can have different, strains of communism. And overseas, pretty much anywhere, not in the United States, being a communist or saying that you are a communist is not something that is considered to be a dirty little secret. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Do you
fully
get
agree
pushback?
with that. Of course we get pushback, but I think that people are more open-minded now than ever before about different ideologies or just different questions that are being asked, hearing different perspectives. And that's the beautiful thing, especially about Gen Z and this new digital era that we're living in, is so many eyes are being really open for the first time. And once they're open, you can't close them again. So it's not to say that, all of my followers or even a large portion of them are communists. They're definitely not. But it's about creating a big tent of people from all political backgrounds that can unite against this Epstein regime on the liberal and, conservative side. It's one big party, as we all know, but what is Washington, D.C. today? Yeah,
isn't that the truth? I want to ask you about foreign policy, and I hope you don't mind if I spend a little bit of time on foreign policy. This is a love of mine and one of my great interests. But you've taken some foreign policy positions that are almost in lockstep with mine. We may come to the same conclusions from different places, but we come to the same conclusions. So you have taken positions in support of Palestinians, for example. So have I. And before we started talking, I mentioned to you, I've been getting a lot of death threats. A lot. At first I just blow them off, they're crackpots. I get maybe one a year, one every couple of years. Now I'm getting every couple of days, I'm getting death threats. And they've become very, very specific. They are always because of my position in support of Palestinian human rights. And on that, like you, I will never waver. Never. But they're very specific, like telling me, I can't wait to see your brains on the sidewalk in front of, and then they recite my home address. I went to see an A-list, internationally known podcaster 2 weeks ago. And we've been friends for more than a decade. And he was wearing a bulletproof vest, and he had security in the office. In fact, I was introducing myself not introducing myself, I was saying hi to everybody around him. It's mostly young people. And there was a guy a little bit older than me, and I said, hi, I'm John. I shook his hand. And he said, oh, we've met. I said, oh, we have? Was it last time I was up here? He said, nope. It was in the Safe House, 2002, Islamabad. And I said, oh, I remember you. I said, you were the guy. And he said, yeah, I was the guy. I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm heading security. But this is how dangerous things have become since Charlie Kirk was killed. There are these allegations that maybe an ally of the United States was behind the murder of Charlie Kirk. We don't know. The FBI and the Utah State Police aren't releasing any information. But my point here is that people who have taken positions in support of Palestinian human rights are being described as extremists and anti-Semites and all kinds of terrible things leading to death threats. What has your experience been, and why have you come out in support of Palestinian human rights? And that's not a rhetorical question, I mean it quite literally.
Well, that's an incredible story, and just goes to show how serious everyone, I hope everyone is taking this matter, right? I hope you're taking it that seriously, given what you just told me. I hope that Tucker's taking it that seriously, because a lot of people would be very happy to see more horrifying things happen, like what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
To those who, again, just state the obvious, that you can't, you can't just bomb an entire country with wanton disregard for civilian life. You can't just carpet bomb the place and turn it into a parking lot. But, there's so many aspects to why I think people support the Palestinians or support any of the countries that are being targeted by U.S. or proxy aggression right now. And the way that I see it, it's twofold. I mean, of course, I feel as though our government is captured by big finance, by finance capital. I think it doesn't represent us, so on and so forth. And every single blow to the American empire, especially abroad as it stretches its wings with these hundreds of military bases and all the operations that it carries out on a daily basis, I say that whoever does that, whoever strikes that blow, is a brother in the common struggle that I'm in to try and actually get a government that represents, the needs of the working class of America. And it's obviously not to say that I would ever support terrorism, against our government or something like that. But it's just these are sovereign struggles that people are waging to try and safeguard their homelands. And that's the other aspect here, because in the same way that, most people, I'm beginning to see that some people can't recognize this basic fact anymore, but in the way that most people understand that, for example, child sexual abuse is horrific and disgusting and demonic and, the worst thing that you could ever imagine, because on so many levels, but of course, at its core, you are stripping a child of its potential for living a life that has some sort of meaning, a life that has some sort of hope. You're stripping that away from a child. That's exactly what the U.S. is doing to all of these countries, all of these innocent people all across the world. They're stripping away their right to live some sort of a meaningful life with hope that things could get better. And I think that's horrific, and I think it's terrifying that this has been normalized.
Why do you think we have different rules for different countries? And I'll tell you what pops into mind immediately, you just raised it, is this Israeli government official who was arrested for a child sex crime in Las Vegas, 6-8 months ago. And the next thing you know, before the guy can even be arraigned, he's on a plane back to Israel. Why? Because Israel does not extradite Jews for any reason. And he got off scot-free. Now, just yesterday or the day before yesterday, another Israeli government official was arrested in the United States for a child sex crime. We should not expect that there will be justice in that case. Why do we put up with things like this? What is it about the Israelis that they have such a hold on us?
Well, I think you're in the position to answer that question better than I am. But, you just laid out the perfect example about the individual who threatened you over standing up for Palestinian rights. And, we're just commentators. Of course, I've been threatened. You've been threatened. Before the Iran war started, I was trying to organize a group of people to go out to Iran and just document what's going on in the lead up to what we assumed all to be was going to be a major war. And I received word through a trusted individual that I know and is, very high up and whatnot, that, not because of me necessarily, but because the people we're trying to bring to this trip to Iran, the war is about to begin, and Israel and the United States would love to have the opportunity to accidentally, launch a Tomahawk missile in our direction or something. So that trip got canceled.
Yeah.
I think it's primarily due to blackmail. I mean, how else could you describe it, right? I mean, you brought up Charlie Kirk. Of course, we don't have, rubber stamp proof of, someone in Israel did something or they were somehow involved. We have a lot of ancillary details that we can look at that are very concerning. But same could be said about other leaders in American history who've been assassinated. You could look at USS Liberty, for example, and really the fallout of that. There's too many instances to count, and you just don't see that with other countries.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing, whether it's an adversary or a supposed ally. Sure, you may have pushback, like with Ukraine, But the level of which we see that pushback or the threats, it's nowhere near to the level we see with Israel.
Yeah, that's so true. There are a couple of things that bother me very much. One is that if you are not in lockstep politically with Benjamin Netanyahu, not with Israel, with Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, you're an anti-Semite. And the Israelis have gotten to the point where they describe everybody as an anti-Semite. I've got a close friend who's an American citizen now, but he had been born and raised in Israel. He served in the IDF. He was in special forces, married an American, moved to the United States. And he told me that they're taught in schools as they're growing up to accuse everybody who doesn't agree with Israel of anti-Semitism. And I said to him, you know, that's probably the biggest engine for anti-Semitism that's out there. You can't accuse everybody of being anti-Semitic, including Semites. They accuse Palestinians all the time of being anti-Semites, and they are the original Semites, practically, or among the original Semites. So anyway, that's one thing. The other thing is open interference in American politics and American elections. I was on Capitol Hill the other day, and I'll tell you, very few things make me as angry as when I went to, for example, the office of Senator Tom Cotton, the conservative Republican from Arkansas. He has an Israeli flag in the hall outside his office. Now, can you imagine if somebody had a Russian flag, or even in my case, a Greek flag? We would be accused of, you know, espionage or not being patriotic or whatever. But you put an Israeli flag and then people salute it. We have a congressman from Florida who went onto the floor of the House of Representatives wearing an IDF uniform to show his solidarity with Israel. You know, a lot of these things to me would seriously call into question the patriotism of our elected officials. Lindsey Graham, probably my least favorite elected official on Capitol Hill for a whole bunch of reasons, said just a couple of days ago that until he draws his last breath, he said his last breath will be in support of Israel. Well, how about in support of America? Like, has that even occurred to you? I'm mystified by this attitude on Capitol Hill. Why? It didn't used to be like that. You know, I'm reading a book right now about John Kennedy and his interactions with the Israelis, especially around the nuclear issue. And John Kennedy was very upset with the Israelis. The Israelis were very upset with John Kennedy and may have played a role in his demise. We don't know. Lyndon Johnson was afraid of the Israelis. And then Richard Nixon guaranteed Israeli security for the first time in history. Guaranteed it. And nothing has been the same ever since. Is there any going back from that?
Well, you bring up the example of how being what would effectively be described as an agent of the state of Israel, that's non-existent. You know, you can't be expected to receive however many hundreds of thousands of dollars from the state of Israel or their foreign ministry or media apparatus, and then someone asking you to go register under FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's just not going to happen, at least in 99% of the cases. Maybe there's a few outliers. But, you know, it's like, I think it should go even beyond that. If someone was working for the North Koreans, I don't think it's a matter of whether or not they did or did not register under the Foreign Agents Act as to whether or not they'd avoid any sort of criminal investigation. I think if you are getting paid by the North Koreans, you know, you're going to have a pretty lengthy file on you investigation, and probably you're going to be prosecuted because we don't even allow American citizens with passports in good standing to enter into North Korea at this point in time, thanks to Trump under his first administration. I think that's where the policy should be with the Israelis. I mean, this is a terrorist state that's committing a genocide in Gaza, that wants it and is working to annex the West Bank. They are committing war crime after war crime, not just in the south of Lebanon, not just cutting it off and occupying it yet again, but trying to target Beirut as much as they can without receiving any sort of slap on the wrist from the United States. and now Iran. And now I'm hearing from my Iraqi friends, I'm seeing these photos of some exploded military assets in Iraq. They've got some sort of a military base in Iraq. I know Max Blumenthal was just on Jimmy Dore's show talking about it. I don't even know what that's about, but I'd imagine maybe in Erbil. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But it's like, this is a legitimate terrorist government. North Korea, okay, maybe you find them scary, but like, what are they doing? Did they just slaughter 200,000 plus civilians in a neighboring state? No. Why are we treating our so-called enemies as these horrifying pariahs that no one can ever even talk to? But then with Israel, there's no rules whatsoever. It's sickening. So yeah, I think I agree with you. These sorts of policy changes need to be the first steps. Obviously, JFK and RFK tried to do that. And then magically, after JFK was assassinated and then Bobby tried to run for president, he got assassinated in California. That policy is never talked about again, of registering the Israel lobby as a foreign agent in the United States.
No, it's not talked about again. I want to ask your opinion on something too. I've said on a bunch of podcasts that starting around 1986, when Ronald Reagan was president, literally every single Israeli prime minister who would come to Washington would ask every president, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. They would ask every single president, please bomb Iran, please bomb Iran, please bomb Iran. And every single president said no. In fact, Barack Obama, and it's like a kick in my gut to have to compliment Barack Obama. But Barack Obama said a couple of weeks ago that when Benjamin Netanyahu came and Obama was president and he said, please bomb Iran, Obama said no. Netanyahu said, if you don't bomb Iran, I'm going to use nuclear weapons against Iran. And Obama said, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. Go ahead and use nuclear weapons. And of course, it was a bluff. Well, the conventional wisdom is that Netanyahu came back earlier this year and asked Donald Trump, bomb Iran. Trump said no. He said, if you don't bomb Iran, I'm going to use nuclear weapons. Trump said yes. And now here we're involved in a war that we can't win. Do you think that narrative is true? Do you think that the Israelis bullied us and threatened us? And the reason why I ask is this. Just recently, Donald Trump declared a ceasefire in Lebanon, right? And as soon as he declared it, the Israelis bombed Lebanon again. And it just seems to me that the Israelis do whatever they want, whenever they want, knowing that the United States will never push back. Do you think that's true, number one? And number two, why and how did the Israelis get away with that?
Well, I think to answer quickly, I think, yeah, that is true to a certain extent. I mean, I think Israel and the U.S. probably have differing goals in Lebanon in particular. As I understand, the U.S. is building like the largest consulate or one of the largest consulates or embassies in the world right now in Beirut. So I don't know, but maybe the U.S. would prefer stability. Clearly, this idea of trying to kill off Hezbollah didn't work. That didn't work at all. I mean, look at how strong they are. And it's not even about the missiles anymore. It's about the drones, how quickly they can produce them, how cheap. And they're pretty skilled operators for such a short period of time using these FPV drones and hitting high-value targets. But I think, yeah, I'm sure that Israel acts without any sort of regard for U.S. requests or anything like that. But on the flip side, I do believe that the Iran war has been made out into a single narrative, that being that Netanyahu forced us into this, and it kind of absolves Trump of any sort of real wrongdoing or any sort of power that he himself has to make that decision. As you mentioned with Obama, if that story happens to be true, I mean, that goes to show that you, as the president, you do have the capacity to make a decision. You do have the capacity to make certain threats. If they can threaten you, you can threaten them right back. Yeah. And I think it boils down to the simple fact that the U.S. has wanted this war for decades and decades. And right now, you've got proxy war against Russia, which is a mess. You've got millions and millions of dollars of weapon shipments to Taiwan. And Iran, if you just look at it from the U.S. perspective, the DOE is going to be very happy. All the Gulf states get nerfed, and the oil industry there goes, through the floor. And American oil companies in the long term, I think, will benefit from that. You look at the geopolitical analysis. Well, if you balkanize Iran into a dozen microstates where there's going to be terrorism all over the place, it's going to turn into some Syria 2.0. That's going to cause problems for Russia in the south. And also, one of the discussion points has been whether or not the U.S. is going to invade. And I don't really know if I believe this whole Karg Island story. That seems like a very difficult operation. I think it'd be more likely that, I'm no expert, but it seems likely that they would target Chabahar in the south, in the southeast.
Yeah.
And if they target that and they get the local Baluchi people on their side, which I don't think they'll do, but that cuts off Iran from Afghanistan and Pakistan, which cuts off China's Belt and Road Initiative. So,
and keep in mind, too, I'm sorry to interrupt you, keep in mind that the Baluchis are generally Sunni Muslims. Even though they are in majority Shia Iran, in that part of southeastern Iran and southwestern Pakistan, southern Afghanistan, they're Sunni Muslims. And there's already a separatist movement there, the Baluch People's Army. So I think you're right. If they really wanted to stir up trouble, that's where they're likely to do it.
Yeah, and even Netanyahu, I think, understands all this stuff. When he went to the United Nations, it was the UN General Assembly he went to, he held up those two signs that said, the curse and the solution or something.
Yeah.
And the curse was just China's Belt and Road Initiative. The solution was the, what do you call it, the India something corridor to Europe where it goes through Israel.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of motives here, but I think to say that it's all Israel's fault is missing the mark.
Was so important, and why you think the third tranche will or will not be released.
Okay, so let's start with the second tranche, and then just, if I forget, remind me to come back to the third tranche. But there were multiple tranches technically, but if we're talking about the main things where we got big dumps, we had the one in December, and then we had the one on January 30th or 31st, whatever that Friday was. And that was the second one that really flipped the world upside down. The reason that one was so eye-opening and shocking is because it, for the first time, officially showed all these people, these elites of high society, in a way that you and I, maybe you through your old job, but like I could never possibly understand, discussing some of the most disgusting things openly in a, I wouldn't even describe it as just flippant, but in like an understood manner on Gmail, and basically admitting that this idea of like some global elite society pulling the strings in ways that we can't see that go far beyond the ballot box that we vote for on Tuesdays and Novembers actually does exist. Here it is out in the open, and they laugh at the fact that they can do everything without us knowing, because that's just the way the world works. So hurts. I think at the highest 30,000 foot view in the air, that's what was shocking. Then you see the actual details. And the thing that really shocked me to my core was the fact that there were people in the past, and I think you had similar sentiments when we talked about this as well. There were people in the past who would make some claims to me that, even if I could look at it retroactively and say, you know what, they didn't really present a lot of evidence to me, I have to, it doesn't matter. I still have to go back to those people and be like, hey, I thought that was complete bullshit, and I can no longer say for sure that's bullshit. And in some cases, it's like, no, there might be something real there. Like, for sure. You see coded language, and it also went way beyond just the sex trafficking, which, if you're someone who's looked at this case as long as I have, that part was less surprising, but the scope of it and the height of the power of it was on a level that I don't know that I totally foresaw. I knew Epstein was like that. I didn't know he was like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you and I also talked about like Tucker Carlson's idea of like there being this supra government.
Yes.
Where, you have the layer that we thought was the top layer, which is basically like heads of state, think the president, heads of major countries, heads of industry, people like that.
Bankers.
And they run, well, yeah, we would have put the bankers that we see in there, the Jamie Dimons of the world.
Right.
But we thought that was the top level. And what Tucker was saying, and I agree with him, I think the evidence is there. It's actually the third level. There's 2 levels above that. The level at the top is like the shadow society of technocrats and bankers who actually run the world, including people you have never heard of, not just people that are, been on the conspiracy theory videos that are looking pretty right, over the past 10, 20 years, but people that literally to this day, we don't even know their names from these emails. And people who we do think the Rothschilds and stuff like that. And then there's a layer in between them and the heads of states and the heads of industry. And that's the fixer class, which is like this billionaire class of sleuthy spy types. The way I would describe it is, you ever seen Breaking Bad?
Oh, yeah, every episode.
Okay. Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein's Mike Ehrmantraut.
Yeah. The
So
fixer.
Mike Ehrmantraut shows up he's a billionaire, Mike Ehrmantraut. Mike Ehrmantraut shows up in a fucking Lincoln Town car looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. And when Walter White talks to him, Walter White thinks he's the dog. But then when he steps out of line, Mike Ehrmantraut slaps him in the face like, a child and says, no, here's what you're going to do. And Mike Ehrmantraut works for the guys that you've never seen before. And the guys you've never seen before who runs the world. So we got that layering, and I feel the more I look at these emails, the more I go through them, the more I look at the context, the more I feel really comfortable with that. Now, coming back to the third tranche that we haven't seen and they're telling us we're never going to see, which, by the way, I would just like to say Todd Blanche while we're at this too. He's worse than Bondi because Bondi at least she's not operating with a full deck. This is not an intelligent woman. I don't know how she got through law school. I don't want to speculate, but the lights are on and there's not a lot home. Todd Blanche is a smart guy. He knows exactly what's going on. And I don't know that I've ever seen someone so confidently, snarkily gaslighting people he's going on Stephen Miller's wife's podcast to gaslight people at this point. Like, get the out of here, pal. And then there was the press conference that you saw, maybe it was from last summer or maybe the winter or something like that, where the reporter's asking him about, are we going to hear more about, the sex trafficking of children? He's like, sex trafficking of children? And then the reporter's like, yeah, like Jeffrey Epstein. He's like,
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
no, there's nothing like that in there. It's so
boy.
sinister.
And that would account for Dan Bongino being as angry as he was when he resigned. Do you remember just the week before Dan Bongino resigned as the deputy director of the FBI, he was in a press conference with Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, and Pam Bondi, the attorney general, and he had the most furious, the angriest look on his face, and he didn't say a word. They did the talking. Next thing you know, he resigns. And then he doesn't want to talk about it. Well, the people who followed him were the same ones who celebrated his appointment as deputy director of the FBI because finally MAGA is going to get in there and they're going to drain the swamp. And the swamp wasn't drained. The swamp creatures maintained their authority over the swamp. And he realized there's no solution here, at least not one that I can fix as the deputy director of the FBI.
Right. That's right.
Painful.
And I wonder, man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall back there.
Yeah, you can say that again.
I was never a fan of Dan Bongino. I mean, I have very different politics from him, and he was always just kind of an angry screamer to me. But I respected the fact that here was a guy who had a very big show, made a lot of money, and decided to put action behind his words and go in and attempt to do something about it. I wasn't really sure what his qualifications were to run the FBI. He had been in the Secret Service before, but you know what? The FBI had fallen so far that, like, as far as I'm concerned, you could have gotten that Iraqi janitor to get in there and try to do it if he was still alive. God bless him. If you know, you know. But it's like, I appreciated that he was doing that. And then I remember when there was the snafu in like June, July, when Elon came out and nuked Trump about the Epstein thing. And then the administration was trying to say, yeah, all the stuff we said about there being files, there really are none. There's nothing to see here. I remember it was around that era. Bongino did an interview with Kash Patel for Fox News, and he looked like a hostage. I mean, if you've ever seen the meme of the kid leaning forward with like his vein in his forehead, which I always thought Dan Bongino was the adult version of that kid. It was on a whole nother level, you know, and it looked like it was like blink twice or I'll be shot. So I remember thinking like, damn, I'm really going to want to see what he has to say when he leaves. And then he leaves. And he goes full blown. I mean, he's got the boot so far down his throat, he can taste the rubber in his stomach. So, and watching him disparage people, I mean, he's so hated. His own base hates him. And then you see some of these public appearances where where people walk up to him and say, "Yo, go yourself, Dan," and shit like that. And he looks dead inside.
Yeah.
He looks like, you hear that phrase, it's overused sometimes, like, oh, they saw a ghost. He looks like he saw 100 ghosts.
It's as though he can't believe this is happening to him, because he really believed in his own mind that he was doing the right thing and he was going to clean the place up, and he can't believe this is happening to him.
Yeah. I just, if I were him, a little PR advice for Dan out there. He won't do this, but, you know, if I were a fly on the wall back there and I had seen whatever happened to him, and whoever walked in with a black hat and said, hey, buddy, here's the reality we're dealing with here. If you do anything, if I were him having left there and I had millions and millions of dollars in the bank like he does, I would have gone away. I wouldn't have gotten in front of a camera. I would have gone away. I would have gone to an island somewhere. That's a bad way to put it.
No pun intended.
I shouldn't have said it like that. I would have gone somewhere incognito with my family and gotten the out of Dodge. And he's tried to walk back in like it's nothing and say, oh, yeah, no, it's all nothing. And it's just very strange because, first of all, another surprise in the second tranche is that my government and intelligence in my government in the United States is more involved than I previously thought.
Yes.
The more I look at it, the more I'm like, yo, they go back farther than I always thought. They're more involved than I thought. This guy was dealing with a lot of different people, including a lot of elements of my own government. It's not this unitary story that I thought it was, where it was like, it's just Mossad. However, secondly, yeah, he was knee-deep in Mossad. Anyone with half a brain's known that for the last 7 years, whatever it is. You know, so it's just very strange when guys like Bongino go out of their way to shut that part down and be like, yeah, no, nothing to see there. Like, why is that, Dan?
What do you attribute that to? Because
I don't know.
He has gone out of his way to shut that down, and we all know. I mean, like you say, if you have half a brain, you see that he was Mossad, that he had volunteered to the CIA, he had volunteered to the FBI, he had volunteered to MI5 and MI6, he had sought a meeting with Vladimir Putin personally and was turned down. So he was out there volunteering to anybody who would take a meeting with him. Why? And why are we denying that that took place?
Well,
because like you say, anybody with half a brain can see what was happening here. You know, Alan Dershowitz won't even speak to me anymore because I have said repeatedly in his presence that Epstein was a Mossad access agent. And
he's told you that's why he won't speak to you?
Oh yeah, he's furious with me. Yes, furious. But that's okay. I'll survive somehow.
That's fine.
Somehow,
that's fine with me.
I'll get past it somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what do you attribute all this to? If Kash Patel, who was supposed to be one of the good guys, whether you agree with his politics or not, and Dan Bongino, who came in as, you know, the guy that's going to fix all this, if they either are silenced or co-opted, one seems to have gone one way, the other seems to have gone the other, then what is in these files that has so cowed these people?
Or what have they done? I don't know.
Or what
Everyone's
have they
got
done?
their skeletons in their closet. I don't know how it works back there. Honestly, this is a question that you'd be way better speculating on than me. But there's little things that happen in my studio where, you know, I talk to all these different people from so many walks of life, and like these little lines, maybe it's just because I'm in here, but they'll stand out to me sometimes. And even if they don't hit as hard for people at home just watching it on TV or listening, they stick with me. And I remember back all the way in episode 16, this is 2020, towards the start of my show. I had my friend Alex Horowitz on the show, who was one of the early employees at 8 Sleep, which is like a major sleep startup that's worth billions. And so he had been in and around the whole VC universe and all that. And one of the things he said at the time was that, and I forget exactly how he said it, so I'll fuck up the phrasing. He said it way better than this, but he's like, these people, referring to people at the highest levels of government and their partners in the tech community who work with them, have the ability to simulate society. And what he meant by that was they can simulate an impetus that they put on people, information they share with a population, and simulate what would happen should they share that information. He was telling me this back in 2020, that they had the power to do this. And the more time went by, the more I was like, I think he's right about that. And so what I sit up and wonder is if all the things that are attached to Epstein, or if Epstein's just, you know, the little plug you're pulling from the dam where you see a trickle, and then all of a sudden the whole spring like pops up and it's something way beyond him. You know, have they, and I'm not defending them in doing this, I'm just speculating if this is what the logic is, have they simulated this and decided, oh my God, if we come out with this, this is a civilizational collapse, existential crisis, and society can't handle it, so we'd rather just deal with the bad PR. A bunch of people are going to lose on a Tuesday in November, but the system will survive, whatever that means.
Right.
And it comes back to the house of cards that we live in. You know, I look around all the time and I go, man, the cars down there are driving on the right side of the road, and the other ones are driving on their right side of the road, and it works. What happens the day where they all decide to drive on the opposite side of the road, or one side decides to drive on the opposite side of the road? Everyone dies. It's that simple.
Yes.
Right? So when we look at laws, when we look at borders, countries, all these things, the older I get, the more I realize these are just stories that we've told ourselves, and at a base level have built into our being in a country like America that we accept. We accept the fact that there are laws, and if you break them, you go to jail.
Yeah.
So if that were to all collapse, fucking French Revolution style or something, you have Mad Max Fury Road.
Yes.
And so what these guys may be thinking is we have yes, exactly. We have enough control of the narrative that we can take bad PR for a while by basically saying, oh, you see the law there? Yeah, it doesn't apply to us. And some of us will lose. Some people will be exposed by TMZ and be forced to resign. But these are just cogs on the wheel. And as long as the system stays in place, it'll all be worth it 10 years from now. And this isn't about Israel. It's not about China. It's not about the U.S. It's about the system, whatever that is, if that makes sense.
See, but then doesn't it just make it look like the system is so corrupt that it can't possibly continue to function? Or maybe conversely, the corrupt system is so embedded in American culture that we get to see how corrupt it is with the release of these documents, and nobody cares. What we're not seeing is people in the streets demanding the heads of the people who have appeared in these files. You and I were talking several weeks ago about Catherine Remler, who was the White House General Counsel, the top attorney in the Obama White House, exchanging thousands of emails with Jeffrey Epstein and trying repeatedly to introduce Jeffrey Epstein to CIA Director John Brennan. We don't know why. She won't talk, and it's not like she faded into obscurity at the end of the Obama administration. She went on to be the general counsel at Goldman Sachs, probably making more money than she could count in a lifetime. And it was only because she was outed by people like you who were actually going through these Epstein files that she finally was forced to resign. So why? Why are people not in the streets over this? Why is this not a campaign issue, for example? We've got volatile midterm elections coming up in November, and nobody's talking about this stuff. Why?
It's an amazing question. And there was from one of the solo episodes that we're doing weekly now as well, on top of the guest episodes. I had a clip that we later put out where I said, I watched cities burn because one guy died. And I don't see anyone in the streets over all these kids and everything. And that's something we all, the whole show, we all agree on it. Why is that? And some people answered me angrily, and I appreciate them a lot because they're fed up. And they said, because no one's paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said,
And that's true.
The reason that people were out in the streets so heavily in the past has been because there's funding behind these things, and they find the people who are looking to make a few bucks and go out there and yell and say down with the system and all that, and then go home and sit on this and be a part of the same system that, they claim to just be against and everything. But there is something about the comfort that we've been afforded in society where everything is available to us, that the same people who go on and you know what, I'm guilty of this sometimes too, so I'm not just calling out a bunch of people here, but like, we'll go on and complain about X and then walk outside and passively do Y, and Y is the same shit as X in different packaging.
Yeah.
I can sit here and complain about food dyes and stuff and then drink out of the same plastic water bottle for 5 days.
Right.
Joke's on me. You know what I mean? I've done that. So there's something about that slow burn where you don't just get bread and circus, but you get so many things that are automated in your life that the most simple survival things like food, water, and shelter are so far past what we have to look at, right? Like that's the baseline of humanity. Oh, if I don't go out and kill something today, some animal and eat, my family dies. If we don't get to a cave, we're going to get eaten by a lion. We are so evolved past that all the thousands of other things that we take for granted in between then and there allows us to get to this point that the most we do is yell on a phone, or, if you're actually a creator or something trying to do something about it, I'm talking to a camera into a mic. It helps get the message out, but that's one step in what really needs to be about 100, 200 steps to actually get something done.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is hard not to be cynical about it, but I also try to look at it like, well, what are the cons here to taking it all down at once? Like, you and I both agree, we have a similar worldview about the rot in the system.
Exactly.
Trying to get rid of it.
100% correct. Yes.
Right. But here's the way I put it. Let's say you walk up to the biggest mansion on earth, and it's historic. It's 3,000 years old. It's like, majestic. It's on a plot of land that's, 30 square miles. There are 10,000 rooms in this castle mansion, whatever you want to call it. And you come upon it and you realize that there's been a massive asbestos and termites breakout in there.
Okay.
Not in every room, though. Not in every single room, but in many rooms. And you have two options. You can be like, oh my God, we got to get how many people with hazmat suits and go in here and try to go room to room and just burn out one room at a time to be able to salvage the structure. That's going to take, it's going to take 30 years and shit. Oh my God. Or you sit there and you go, you know what? It really sucks. I love history. This is a great thing, but we still got the land. You know what? Just burn it down. We'll rebuild something new. The easy thing is to do the burn down. The harder thing, and I don't want to marry myself to this, but I believe the right thing is to do the room by room asbestos. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can just cancel every single thing in our system at once because, there's a subset of our system that has decided they're going to rape kids and not adhere by what people vote for, right? you got to get rid of that. And then you got to get rid of all the things, the octopus tentacles that touches, while still preserving some sanctity of what our guys built into the original Constitution, which we have drifted farther and farther away from, to be very clear. I'm not denying that at all.
Yes.
I study the out of the Revolutionary War. I love that stuff. Like, this is like a big deal for me that it's 250 this summer, and it's got me thinking a lot about like where we're at. And no one's perfect. Those guys were not perfect by any stretch, but they were amazing. And the that they were able to foresee and write into some level of code, at least, you know, whether it be in the Constitution or the ideas that they later put out in formulating the government and setting precedent, is incredible. And for some reason, it just feels like that, not to use the word twice, but that precedent overall that they set is less and less followed by the people who seem to find themselves in powerful positions. And, and that's why a case like yours stood out to me so much, because I remember reading about your case like long before I knew you, years ago, when it was there.